Okay, I got one more for you. I was thinking I can't talk about half of the dark arts without talking about them all. So, I talked about my history of weed. This is my history of alcohol. And this is a little bit longer. And I could never tell it all. So, I'm just gonna try and think about the highlights that involved alcohol and the mishaps that have happened. But, first of all, I have to say that my favorite song growing up, I had a lot of them, but one of them prominently was Tequila. And I did like the Ninja Turtles did the and loved the Ninja Turtles, and that must have made me love tequila. But that may have been a bad omen. So that might have been when I was 6 or 7 or 8, and when I was 10, I remember we had a something at our house, and we had people over, and there were kegs in the garage at the house I grew up in, and we were in the front lawn, me and my cousin, and we're the same age, and his dad or my dad or whoever it was, they're like, hey, like, go get us a beer from the keg. So we're like, all right. And there's no one in the garage, and we come in there, so we're with the kegs alone, and we're like pumping it and filling it up, and we're like, this is so cool, like how this stuff works. And so we're sitting there, and now we got this beer, and no adults around. And we're looking at each other, and we're like, you gonna try it? He's like, I don't know, like, you gonna try it? So we end up taking a sip, and I remember just being like, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. And I remember me and my cousin looked at each other, and we were like, we are never gonna do this. This is just like the worst thing. Like, we've seen what it's like if people are drunk and stuff, and like what it does to people, and no, like, this is a drug, and we're never gonna do this. And we like made a pact, and we slapped hands, and then whatever, we went and ran the beer to our parents, and they timed us, and I don't think we set a record that time, but every time I had to run and get a beer, I was trying to set the record, and I feel like I did really good at besting myself because I was growing, so my legs were getting longer, I was getting faster. I could probably do my best time now if my dad were still to ask me and say he's gonna time me, though I'm not entirely sure he was timing me at all. He might have just been throwing out numbers. Anyway, I digress. So let's fast forward until sophomore year of high school. And I'm over at my buddy's, who's a little bit older, that I wrestle with. And they throw a party. And it's like, they got the cool dad who's there at the party, and he's drinking with the kids. And we were younger, because my friend, who was a year older than me, it was his brother who's like 2 or 3 years older than him. Like, these are all college kids, and then me, who's a sophomore. And I think it was just my buddy who was a junior. And so I'm at this party, and first of all, I give one of the college kids I'm like, oh, buy me alcohol or whatever. You're going, like, here's $40. Go pick me up something. And he got me like a fifth or a pint of something super cheap. And I was like, oh, like, it cost all that $40? And he's like, yeah, like, here you go. And I was like, I don't know any better, I guess. Like, damn, alcohol's expensive. And so, early in the party, um, they had a keg, and I filled up one beer, and it was like my first beer that's mine that I got my hands on. And I'm like, I take a drink, and I remember just being like, I took that drink, and I remember going like that, swallowing it down, and I think I was 16, and so I'm going. And I remember my buddy's older brother, the one in college, looks at me and goes, Wildman, don't give me that pussy bitch beer face. Drink it. I remember being like, lock it up. Like, lock it up. You can't show how horrible it is. And so I was like, whatever. And I can't remember if I finished the beer or what, but I go upstairs. And so they got this alcohol. This it had to have been, I don't know, some kind of whiskey maybe. Probably some cheap whiskey anyway. So they line it up and they get all these, and it's my buddy who's a year older and one of the college kids, the one who bought the beer, who is a real dick now that I think back. So we line up, and he's like, all right, here's what we're doing. And this college kid lines up 6 shots right in front of my buddy. He lines 6 shots up in front of me, and he lines 6 in front of himself. And I'm looking at these shots, and they pour them, and I kind of look around, and I look at this kid who's older. I'm looking for advice. I'm like, hey, are you sure, like, this is a good amount? Like, this seems kind of like a lot. Like, is this normal? I've never really drank before, just like that. And he looks at me and goes, oh, you never drank before? Well, then you got to do these. And he reaches up and he gets these double shots that are twice as big. And he sets 6 of those. So it's 12 shots in front of me. And he pours out all the other shots into them. And then he fills them up to the top. And he's like, all right, here we go. We're going to cheers. We're going to do all of these. So I'm like, all right. And I just steel myself. And I just go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm just fighting not to make a face. Just to try and just be like, and then not just throw up. Because it's just the worst thing ever. It's like drinking straight ink with that crap. Especially, ugh. It's horrible. Anyway, so we shoot this stuff, and I'm like, all right, like that's not so bad, like whatever. And what happened next, I can only describe as if you put a camera on what do they call it? Long exposure, where you take a picture and like you can see headlights, but you can still, the headlights become a line, the light, and so people like show traffic and it'll just look like all kinds of crazy lines going everywhere at the long exposure. That's my memory of walking away from the table. Like, I can see myself walking away, but it's like long exposure. Like, I can see like my own body like stretched, if that makes any sense. And like almost like a cloud that's like me behind me. And then my next memory, I was hopping up and down the stairs like 2-footed, just up 1 step, 1 step, 1 step, and I turn and I go 1 step, 1 step in the middle of a party, in the middle of everyone. And so that's like a flash memory. And then I probably had more like small, like my memories became like these small windows. Like they went from long exposure to boom, there's a small clip. And then like there's another small clip over here. I think I remember wrestling, like I wrestled some college girl, and I don't remember how it got set up or whatever, but I remember that. And then I remember just a flash of like my feet being cold, and then all of a sudden it was like boom, like I woke up in bed like this, and just there was just a stain right here that obviously came from me, and I was just in bed, and it was like very reminiscent of the opening scene from the Hangover movies where they're just like, you see them get out of bed and they just have the camera on their face and they're like looking around and like stumbling out, like, what happened? Where am I? Like, that was my experience that morning. And they're like, and I walk out and they're all up eating breakfast and they turn and they just laugh at me and they're like, you had a fun night? And they're like, yeah, like, you you told some you told one of the girls, like, oh yeah, I wrestled, and she's like, I can wrestle you, and you're like, no, you can't. And apparently, like, they're like, all right, we started, and they said go, and I just fell flat and face planted. And they're like, yeah, you just fell straight, like, you didn't even do anything, you just fell flat. And then they're like, you may or may not have pulled a Will Ferrell and just ran out of the house in the middle of winter in the nude. And I'm still not sure if that happened or not. But that, and they're like, also, I just started throwing up all over their living room and they threw me out onto the deck. And that's about it for that night. And I was just, that was my first hangover and it was just the worst. And they're like, you have to eat breakfast. And I was like, this is the worst. Like, and this is the first time I ever said I'm never drinking again. And it was just horrible. It was because it's just the flu. Like, you have the flu, the brown bottle flu. Well, this was the whiskey flu. And so they're like, you gotta walk. And like, I remember my mom was coming to pick me up. And so they like fed me breakfast, drank, and they like made me walk up and down the road with my friend. Like, you gotta go for a walk, you gotta get air and stuff. And then I think my mom had to know because there's just no way I could have played it off. And just, I had family members coming over that night, and I remember they were all joking, like, oh, like, you're sick, huh? You went to your buddies last night. Like, you hung over? And I remember, like, no, absolutely not. And then, so that kicked off that career. After that, I used to always go back to that friend's house. And I've never gotten drunk like that ever since. I'm sure I've gotten close at times. It's been a lot of years, but I've never been like that. That was bad. But I guess, yeah, I've never taken 12 shots of anything since. I wouldn't. It's horrible. Don't do that. Do not do that ever. It's the worst experience ever. And yeah. So I never did that. But I would always go back to that buddies. And then I started honing my drinking skills a little bit. And so, yeah, I just entered like the party scene. And then eventually, I think that buddy graduated. And I started having bonfires at my house. And there's this little cove of trees way back behind my house. And we called it was a sand pit, is what it's called. And it would block out all the noise. And you couldn't see it from any house. And you couldn't see any house from it. And we would just, I'd throw these bonfires. And then we would take our trucks and just go cruising through the woods. And go mud bogging through the swamps and stuff. And I did that for like 10 years. Like, from around my senior year until I started dating my last girlfriend when I was 23. And then my brother took it over and he started throwing them. And eventually we just got lazy and just started throwing them right in the backyard. Stopped driving the 100 yards to the sand pit. And we'll still have fires now, but everyone's older and more responsible, which is a good thing. And then, so that was my drinking career. Is like Saturday, people would call and I'd just be like, oh, let's try a party. Like, you enter like the whole like college scene, and it's just, where's the wildest party? Let's go to, or whatever. But I eventually started to grow out of that. And there's this, I guess the phase shift I can think of is I joined a bowling league, and at this bowling league, it was on a Wednesday, and I would drink on a Wednesday. So then I'd go, and people would always want to party and stuff, though not as much, but we would still, like, Saturdays or Fridays, so it'd be like party Friday and Saturday, have Sunday off, have Monday off, and Tuesday off. Wednesday I go to bowling, and bowling's just this atmosphere, and everyone's drinking and bowling stuff, and you're out having a good time. So I got into a habit where I would drink 1 beer per game, so I'd have 3 beers every time I went out to bowling. And then I did that for a whole entire bowling season, and it got to the point where, like, because Thursdays you'd sometimes party too. Like, Thursdays are almost Fridays. So Thursdays are like 50-50 on whether you're going to party or not. Fridays you are. So I would have 3 beers Wednesday, probably have a couple beers Thursday, depending, 50-50 on half of them. Definitely Friday, Saturday. So Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday were the guaranteed only days. And it's just this, going to bowling, you get in this habit to where, like, even if nothing was going on Thursdays, like, I'd have a beer or two. And, or it'd be like a Monday night sitting there watching TV. And it was like, whatever, you don't really think about it much. But I started to kind of realize it, like, whoa, like, I need to get back to, like, I just drink when I go out partying. Like I don't drink much on the weekdays, but a couple every day, like, I don't need to do that. I can just drink water or whatever. And so that's how, like, habits form. And it was definitely like building a habit and like an addiction, I guess. And so I'd go and I'd like take periods off. Like, I'd be like, all right, I'm not drinking. But then everyone, like, I hang out with, and all my friends are mostly drinkers, so it'd always be like, yeah, I'm not drinking. Like, you want to hang out? Like, yeah, sure. So you go hang out, and it'd just be like, like, all right, we're all drinking. All right, yep, let's do it. Just like the good old days. And the worst thing was I started using it as a coping mechanism, and I still do, for anxiety. Like, once my anxiety started hitting, I'd be like, okay, if I'm gonna go in public and hang out with people, I can do it and be really calm and like go to good situations and feel good knowing I can drink. And that probably just, actually, I know it's just with anxiety, you're making it worse in the future. Because if you don't have the alcohol, it's almost like, oh my gosh, like, don't have my medicine, like, I'm gonna be super nervous. But that was whatever. I've learned that it's nice to not drink, and if you really get in a habit of not drinking, it can feel like, and you go out with that confidence of, and you overcome the anxiety. It's a great feeling to be like after you've been there, to be like, oh, I don't need to drink to not be nervous. I can just, go and have a good time and sit and play a board game or whatever, and not feel stuck at the table and not have to worry about not having a beer. But sometimes I'll still use it as a crutch a little bit. And especially since I moved on my own in this house, I've actually had a lot of nights out. And is this thing moving? Oh, this thing is definitely moving. Hang on. That's better. Look me in the eye. Hang on. Not editing that out. So anyway, starting to ramble. But that's the difference between like my weed experience and alcohol is almost like it's been like part of my life since I was 16, and weed has been like these very small encounters that were always their own thing. But I moved into this house, and everyone is younger, and they're still in like the I really want to party phase, and that's kind of changed the way I drink a little bit, because now I'm always around them, and always around it, and I'm like, oh, oh, I was hoping, to like stay in and read a book tonight, guys, or watch some Netflix. And they're like, come on, let's go. And I'm like, oh, you guys just look like you're gonna have so much fun on there. And oh, I've been in this house since June, and I'm like holy crap. Like, all right, I just gotta hit the brakes a little bit. And I have, now that we've gotten used to it, and we've got it in it, I've been able to be like, all right, guys, like, I'm done trying to keep up with you. You guys have fun. I'm just gonna drink water and not. But as of late, oh, the other thing is, I've noticed whenever I try to stop drinking, there's always like all these events. Like, it seems like there's always something, like a party or someone's birthday or a holiday or a gathering or something. That's always like a reason or an excuse where it's like, that's a really good excuse to go drink, or that's like, yeah, it's what we do. We're gonna go and hang out with everyone. We're gonna have some drinks or whatever. And I'm like, all right. So that's always been something that that I've struggled with whenever I'm trying to be like, all right, I'm gonna cut out the drinking a little bit here. And I've always been like, oh dang it, like, why is there a million holidays right now when I decide I'm not gonna drink for a while, get into shape? And I went to the doctor's for a checkup, and one of the questions, and this is a little bit off subject with the holidays, but, and I just remember I thought this was funny. I'm in there and I'm like, hey doc, and now it's kind of weird. Doctors are my age. Like, I'm starting to go in, and like the new doctor, he's my age, and I'm like, that trips me out a little bit. But I'm like, hey doc, what's up? And he's like, hey man, what's going on? I was like, oh, I don't know. He's like, so have you been drinking and stuff? And he's like, looks at me, he's like, yeah, we do a little bit, man. Like he's talking like, oh yeah, like we're kind of from the same groups and stuff. Like, we're the same age, like, I know how it is. And I'm like, yeah, like, I think it was the night before Thanksgiving, which is the biggest bar night of the year. And I was like, yeah, doc, I was like, I had the other night, I was like, we went out with old friends that they're all in town, so I was like, I drank more than I normally do, like a lot more. And he's like, oh yeah, like how many, like what would you say, like the amount? And I was like a lot more than normal. And he's like, what? I was like, 14 beers. And he looked at me, he's like, 6 is binge drinking, Brett. You realize 6 is binge drinking. And I was like, that doesn't seem like very many. I mean, it used to seem like a lot. And so he was like, yeah, he's like, no, if you drink more than 6, you're binge drinking. And I'm like, keep that in mind, like, time to cut back. And because I was like, that's more than double the technical term for binge drinking. And I was like, it was a holiday, we'll let that one slide, but gotta keep it below 6 on the party nights. And that's hard. That's a tough one to do when you're used to going out and partying and drinking a lot. Cutting back to 6. But that's kind of now right where I'm at. Is I'm gonna cool it probably till the summer. Try and get in like really good shape. Like, I see some of these people who don't drink at all, and it's just like, it looks like it's so easy for you to just get cut. And just like your main thing is like, yeah, don't drink. I'm like, I'm like, yeah, so I'm not gonna drink pretty much till summer. I'll drink here and there a little bit, but I'm gonna really cut back and stuff. So yeah, I think I'm done. I'm drinking for a while. But anyway, yeah, that's my history with drinking. So, I catch you guys later. What? It's my sister's 21st birthday tonight. We're going out. I'll start tomorrow.